Hello, hello, and welcome back to the NMMA. Sorry for the delay in getting the video out today, but we're very excited for the playoff stream that's going to be happening tonight. That should be set for about 5 p.m. Pacific, 8 p.m. Eastern, and we hope that you guys can all tune in. If you guys want to join in on the voice chat at all, you're more than welcome to. So let's get into it and take a look at the standings first. All right, so starting off in the East, it looks like the Carmelo Anthony-led Philadelphia 76ers have locked up the 1 seed. Very impressive after they were a 4 to 5 seed, I believe, prior to acquiring Deron Williams. But following the collapse of Detroit, they brought him in, and this team has been absolutely thriving. The Phil Jackson-led 76ers end the season with a conference best 7.1 point differential and 55 wins. They overtook both the Bobcats and the Bulls that were warring it out for the rest of the season for the 1 and 2 seed. The Bobcats finished in the 2 seed with a very respectable 6.5 point differential. And they made no moves throughout the entire season, but this team drafted incredibly well. And Brent is probably going to be leading this team to good playoff runs for at least this and next year. The Bulls, Blake Griffin did lock up Rookie of the Year. So congrats to him and Jimmy. And they finished in the 3 seed, trailing the Bobcats by a surprising 4 games, considering how far ahead they were to start off the first sem. But they finished with a very respectable 4.2 point differential, and they're still definitely contenders. The Knicks traded Shawn Marion back to the Atlanta Hawks after acquiring him in the beginning of the season, bringing in Steven Jackson. And this team that has been making minor tweaks throughout the entire season finishes as the 4 seed, very respectable. The Nets continue to be a 5 seed. However, they have the second best differential in the conference, so we're going to see if that leads to a little bit better of a playoff run than they did in the regular season. And the Pacers, very impressively, after trading away Andre Iguodala, Lamar Odom, bringing in some picks, as well as Corey Maggette and Wesley Matthews, this team is finishing the season in the 6th seed, and we'll see if they look to make any sort of movement here. The KD-led Miami Heat finished in the 7th seed, and they will be facing up against the Bobcats in the first round. They are the only playoff team with a negative point differential, which is quite interesting, especially considering they have the league's leading scorer. They acquired Tony Allen, and it seems that I believe their seed improved a bit, even though their point differential went down, which is quite interesting. That kind of indicates to me that they won quite a few close games, which could be good or could be bad. We'll see how that pans out in the playoffs. And finally, to round out the playoff teams for the East is the Boston Celtics, who started out as an 8 seed, finished Sim 2 as an 8 seed, finished Sim 3 as an 8 seed. Menace has been leading this team to just under 500 success, and they will be having a playoff appearance facing off against the absolutely stacked 76ers. Okay, so for the rest of the teams, the Orlando Magic just barely missed the playoffs. The Bucks remained as a 10 seed. The Washington Wizards, I think they were an 11 seed last sim as well. Kind of surprisingly, the Detroit Pistons, after trading Paul Pierce to kick off the final trade deadline, so you can see that this team is extremely young, being led by Mike Conley. Jason Terry is still there, but I expect that he'll probably be moved within the next season. This team improved. Very surprising. They started out as a 15 seed with an absolutely stacked team that's coached by Greg Popovich, and yet here they are, finishing the season in the 12 seed, and a lot of that has to do with the incredible tank-off that happened. The Atlanta Hawks, with Eric Spoelstra, starting Delonte West playing 48 minutes, James Johnson, Rodney Carney, Theo Ratliff, who I am told are players. They dropped to a 13 seed and do have a lottery pick that's coming into the lottery that will be happening into the playoff stream. The Toronto Raptors, without making any moves other than just tweaking their lineup a little bit, shockingly did fall even further to a 14 seed. And this Derrick Rose-led team that I think just about everybody had in their top 10 and thought we're going to make put on a show in the playoffs, they fell to the 14 seed, and I think that they are, the 5th or 6th best odds in the lottery? kind of crazy. But I mean, that shows that the future of this team could be pretty great because 22-year-old former MVP Derrick Rose is a 97 overall. Paired with pretty much any lottery pick is going to show up quite a bit in the future. The Cleveland Cavaliers finished at the bottom of the Eastern Conference and will be having a great lottery pick coming in with a negative 8.7 differential. Kind of surprising considering they have James Harden, Paul Millsap, and LaMarcus Aldridge, and George Hill, and Hassan Whiteside. Like, this is really not a bad team by any stretch of the imagination, and yet they struggled mightily, and they finished at the bottom of the East. All right, going on to the West, the Portland Trailblazers continue their dominance, improved their defense to drop below 100 points allowed per game, and finish the season with a 12.4 point differential and 65 wins. Not shocking for a LeBron team. I know that's what everyone's going to say, but this team absolutely deserves the credit and the success that I think is headed their way. Kevin Martin has been a bit of a surprise for the season. Everybody knew that he'd be good, but he is the number one three-point shooter in the league. He won the three-point contest in the All-Star break, and he is doing incredible. I think that he's scoring over 25 points per game. Baron Davis, who they brought back off the bench, they brought back into like a starting position with Point LeBron being no more and now him starting at the three. That team is a force to be reckoned with. And the other force to be reckoned with is still, and yet again, our best defense in the league, the Seattle Supersonics, led by now not just Tim Duncan and Kevin Garnett in the best front court in the league, but adding Paul Pierce to kind of resurrect his partnership with Kevin Garnett. This team is the real deal. This is my personal team, my personal pick for a team to make it out of the West. I think they will end up toppling the Trailblazers in the playoffs. I think that this is just too much front court depth for the Blazers to deal with. But we're going to see if that pans out. In the 3 seed, Dwight Howard, Kyle Lowry, Nick Young. This very balanced, but not all of that tweaked Dallas Mavericks team finish just 4 games behind the Seattle Supersonics and top of their division, which gets them to 3. And that goes to show the effects that the division rules have on this sim in particular, because we are going back to 2010, where the leader of the division is guaranteed a top 3 seed. The Seattle Supersonics and the Los Angeles Lakers are in the same division. And so even though the Lakers are 1 game up on the Mavericks, they fall to the 4 seed, which is kind of shocking considering they were in the 2 seed for the vast majority of the season. But Seattle's acquisition of Paul Pierce puts them fairly firmly in that 2 seed. And so the Lakers, led by Point Kobe, Chris Bosh, Tyson Chandler, Ray Allen, very good team, 7.6 point differential, will be facing up against the thriving Utah Jazz in the first round. Utah Jazz acquired Rodney Stuckey at the beginning of this season and have just made minor coaching tweaks and led Paul George to an incredible rookie year campaign. He, I think, was number 3 in rookie of the year voting at the end of the season. And they went on something like a 10-game winning streak during the third sim. This team could look very good for the future, especially if they can find some pieces to add to Paul George. The Vancouver Grizzlies made a very smart acquisition for the waived Drew Gooden to give themselves a little bit of bench depth. And this Russell Westbrook team, Russell Westbrook finishing, I believe, second team All-NBA, as well as second team All-Defense. Incredible stuff. They finished 46-36 in the 6th seed. They will be facing up against the Dallas Mavericks in the first round, and we'll see if they can make some noise. The Sacramento Kings, Boogie, man, he started off a little bit slow to begin the season, but he completed things absolutely on a tear with 30-point game after 30-point game, 14 rebounds all the time. They went on a 14-game winning streak, which is incredible for a team that did not make that many tweaks and really does not have that much veteran talent. And they finished a 7 seed. They were only 1 game back from the 6, and they'll be facing up against the Seattle Supersonics, unfortunately, as a very tough matchup for Boogie in the first round. And finally, rounding out the playoff teams is the New Orleans Hornets, who I believe dropped to a 12 or 13 seed to start things off. They made very minor tweaks as well, but they turned things around, and this Chris Paul, Roy Hibbert, Danny Granger-led team, they will be having a playoff appearance. Good for them. And this also goes to show the difference in depth up top between the West and the East. The bottom team in the West to make the playoffs is still, what is that? 2 games above 500, whereas we have a below 500 team that made the playoffs in the East. Looking at the rest of the West, with the Spurs, who did go up 1 seed from their 10 seed that they were locked in for the rest of the league, for the rest of the sim, up to a 9. The Oklahoma City Thunder finished at 10. The Phoenix Suns, unfortunately, after acquiring Sean Marion in a 2-move trade that happened at the end of the deadline from the Atlanta Hawks and originally the Knicks, they dropped. This team, despite having some great veteran talent, they were the 9 seed and they dropped down to the 11 seed. So all I can say is there is some age problems on this team, and we're going to see what ends up happening with them. But they also have plenty of chips that will still remain in their pocket for the coming seasons, and I do believe they have their pick both this year and next year. The Denver Nuggets, they decided to shut down Steph Curry, and being led by Jordan Farmar, Wesley Johnson, Greg Oden did still get some minutes, it seems, unless that was a tweak that happened after the playoffs. Well, I mean, sorry, after Sim 3. They completed the season in the 12 seed. My Rockets fell just barely by 1 game, thanks to a successful tank, into the bottom 3 teams. And so the Rockets, the Golden State Warriors, and the Minnesota Timberwolves are our bottom 3 teams in the lottery. These 3 teams will have equal shots at a number 1 pick, and I believe, but don't quote me on it, that they are guaranteed a top 5 pick. The Golden State Warriors did end up playing Rondo a full 30 minutes after he was angry to begin the season, and there was a random event that was insisting that he gets more minutes played. And the Minnesota Timberwolves, after selling off their entire team, they are our absolute worst team in the league. They finished the season with a remarkable only 15 wins. They have more losses than the Blazers have wins, and they are at the bottom of the entire league. Let's hope that they get a good lottery pick. Okay, so let's take a look at these playoff matchups. We have Portland versus New Orleans. My prediction here is that it's not going to be a sweep because I actually think the Roy Hibbert is a very difficult matchup for them, and I expect that Portland is going to go ahead to the second round in 5 games. The Lakers Jazz, it looks to me like the Lakers are going to have a little bit of a difficult matchup when the Jazz have had so much momentum, but I think they're going to end up pulling it out in 6. So I think that's going to be a Lakers and Trailblazers second round matchup. Here, I believe that Dwight Howard is going to be a playoff beast, in my opinion. He is the reigning Defensive Player of the Year now. And I believe that the Dallas Mavericks are going to overtake the Vancouver Grizzlies in probably 5 games, despite the all-defense of Russell Westbrook. I may be wrong here. I may be underrating the Grizzlies, but I'm definitely picking the Mavericks. And then finally, the Seattle Supersonics over the Kings. I honestly think this is going to be a sweep. I think that we're going to be looking at Seattle, Dallas, and Los Angeles and Portland in the second round. For the East, we have the Phil Jackson, Carmelo Anthony, Pau Gasol, D. Will, David West, the Sixth Man of the Year, Raymond Felton. Incredible team up top, the Philadelphia 76ers against the just under 500 Boston Celtics. This, by all accounts, should be a sweep. That being said, I got a feeling, and that's all I'm going to be going off of, but I believe that Boston's going to get 1, and I'm going with a gentleman's sweep, Philadelphia in 5. The New York Knicks versus the New Jersey Nets. We have the Battle of New York, New Jersey, but whatever. That's really just New York light. This is an incredible matchup. The New York Knicks have tweaked their lineup quite a few times. They've made a lot of trades around the fringes in order to try to improve their odds. They finished with a 4 seed. I personally think they're probably a little bit better than that, and a lot of that is due to the shifting chemistry of all the trades they made. The New Jersey Nets have the second best point differential in the league. This is a very difficult matchup. Ultimately, I think that Dirk is going to have a very difficult matchup against both Amari and Zebo in the post. And I think that Monta Ellis is going to be able to get past Manu Ginobili. So I am picking the New York Knicks to probably proceed in 6. That being said, the Nets could absolutely turn this around, and we will see what happens. This is probably the closest first-round matchup to keep an eye on. Now, the Chicago Bulls and the Indiana Pacers. Chicago Bulls were the one seed for a large chunk of the year, and they have the incredible 20 and 12 and 4 Rookie of the Year Blake Griffin. I know that the Pacers have been surging. I know that they made some incredible acquisitions and probably ought to be a GM of the Year nominee. However, I just don't know that Josh Smith and role players is enough to take on this Bulls. I think the Bulls probably take it in 5. And finally, the Charlotte Bobcats and Miami Heat. By all accounts, Charlotte Bobcats, they were the one seed for a good chunk of the season. They are an extremely balanced team, whereas the Miami Heat, I want to say, has the only negative point differential of any playoff team. However, I am predicting that KD is going to step it up. I am not quite predicting an upset here, but Charlotte seems like the kind of team that just doesn't necessarily have the star power to absolutely lay waste to their opponents. I think that Charlotte is going to require 6 games to take over the leading scorer in the league. We'll see what happens. But anyway, those are my predictions for the playoffs. Let's take a look at team stats. So we're going to go through this real quickly. First, we're just going to sort it by points per game so that you can see your offenses. And now by points allowed per game. Man, by 3, Seattle's leading. Hey, the Nets with the second best defense in the league, though. I may be underrating them. I'm very curious to see what kind of a show the Nets put on. All right, let's now do it by offensive rating. And defensive rating. And let's just give you point differential. And if you have any other team questions, you can message me for them and I'll send them to you. Negative 14.8. Okay. And let's take a look at the league leaders to finish the season. Oops. So as you can see, Kevin Durant finished with over 32 points per game on the whole season. 1.2 steals, 1.2 blocks. Yeah, his playmaking could probably still improve, but he is 22 years old by a wide margin, leading scoring in the league. That guy, he's got a future. 46 badges already. Derrick Rose, Eric Gordon. Eric Gordon, man, stepping it up to put 26.2 points per game down. LeBron James, Wade, Kobe Bryant, Kevin Martin, 2 of the Trailblazers still in the top 10. Carmelo Anthony on the 1 seed 76ers. Monta Ellis and Josh Smith rounding up the top 10. Josh Smith, I think that he dropped in points per game, so for him to still finish in the top 10 is impressive. Hey, DeMar DeRozan, sophomore at number 11. Shout out. Wabby doing well. Rebounds. Defensive Player of the Year, Dwight Howard. Hey, shout out J.J. Hickson. Chris Humphries. We got some good, somewhat role players, Mahinmi here, who are getting quite a few rebounds. So it looks like we only had one team that, one player who finished with with double-digit assists, just barely, since Devin Harris didn't quite hit it, and that is Chris Paul. Glad that they have a playoff spot. Steals. Chris Paul and Russell Westbrook tied. Hey, Mike Conley at 6. That's impressive. Hey, Patrick Beverley just misses the top 10, but as a rookie, finishing pretty much 12, 4, 4, 1.5, and 0.6, he has got a bright future. Great acquisition by the Bucks. Blocks. Greg Oden, number 2. Tied with Tim Duncan and Dwight Howard. Good race there. Roy Hibbert just barely behind. A lot of great blockers. Shout out JaVale, can't fail. Darko just barely making the top 25. Former GOAT. Let's take a look at 3-point percentage. Peja Stojakovic. Acquired in the Paul Pierce trade, I believe, by the Detroit Pistons, leading the league now by a comfortable margin at 46%. Kevin Martin dropped, so he is no longer the leading three-point shooter. Boobie Gibson. Caspi, number 19. That's pretty impressive. C.J. Watson, I think, despite being the top scorer on the worst team in the league, still shooting three as well. Eric Gordon with the most three-pointers made. Incredible. Sapezia, 1.5 three-pointers made for three-point percentage of 46%. He really needs to up that usage because he is not even in the top 10 of three-pointers made. 21. Incredible. Hey, Quincy Pondexter. Okay, we can take a look at the rookie report. So Blake Griffin took it. Yeah, Boogie was number 2. So I was wrong. Boogie was number 2, of course, and by a sizable margin, putting up 18.5 and 10. You know, he had a great, especially into the season. Paul George, a comfortable number 3. Then Quincy Pondexter, impressive. Pat. Show the top 15. Okay. All right, we'll go ahead and show everybody's picks. Oh, can I not show? I can't show picks right now. Okay, that's fine. I'll show them right after the draft, or right after the playoff stream. There were a couple of trades made, so we should be able to factor that in. I also cannot show lottery odds until the playoffs are over, but we do know broadly what to expect with that. Let's take a look at cap sheets. All right, so here's the 1 seed 76ers. This Bobcats team nearly at the hard cap. You know, it's incredible. They managed their assets very well in the draft, and it has led them to a lot of success. I'm very curious to see how much of that translates to the playoffs. Dominant Chicago Bulls. That Cavs team really should have a bright future. Millsap, Harden, LaMarcus Aldridge, George Hill, and a great lottery pick. Like, they have the opportunity to really assemble a special team, especially after Harden progs a little bit. Hawks here with a lot of cap coming into the offseason. I know of at least one instance with my Rockets that their listed cap number is not accurate. We actually have quite a bit less. The reason for that was Drew Gooden, using the new buyout rule. I bought out his entire, I think, like $31 million contract with my cap space, and that included 5 total years. However, because of the bird rights rules, whenever I was editing the contract, the most that I could allocate to it was 1 year 17, like 0.8 million or something like that. And so that's what we had to put in the game. But fear not, it's still being tracked in the sheet. And it's also relatively irrelevant because all that dead cap is going to fall off the books coming into next season. And it's already too late to sign anybody else. But just so you know, there may be some instances where that happens, and those will need to be manually tracked, where we will cover any of the teams that don't actually have the cap that is stated there. I think that's the only instance that we have right now, though, and this won't be that common of an issue. 11 million in cap for the Nuggets. They steered into the tank and are hoping to get Klay Thompson, I think. Reunite the Splash Brothers. This Pacers team actually should have a little bit of cap, I believe, once some of the things, some of the contracts fall off the books in the offseason. Raptors may be coming into a little bit of cap. Hopefully they can retool. Spurs probably looking at about a steady amount of cap. They may gain actually a little bit. They may have over 10 million, maybe 15. Kind of depends on which team options they opt into. Which, by the way, I will do my best to include everybody's team options that they need to accept or decline going into the offseason. The deadline for that will be the end of the draft, which I expect that the draft will probably start today after the playoff stream, but the clock is not going to turn on until sometime tomorrow. And so I expect that the draft will at least be going all through tomorrow, and the deadline for team options will be tentatively set for whenever that happens to end. Locked up Blazers. Okay, and that rounds it out. All right, let's take a look at player stats. Solely because B-Harp can't do random events right now, I think there's going to be a change, both to tanking rules as well as we're going to have some extent of a round of random events that happen post Sim 3 going into the future. But because you can't do that right now, I'm going to go ahead and cut minutes out just so that you can see three-pointers made to end the season. But typically, three-pointers made is not going to be visible. You can always message me and ask for that, though. I wish it would remain sorted by points. That's always annoying. Quincy Pondexter, Pat, and Patrick Beverly. And, yeah, Evan Turner is not doing too bad defensively either. That's a good defensive team, but they could really use a scorer. Hoping they land one in the lottery. LaMarcus Aldridge leading scoring. I guess that kind of makes sense at this point of the career. I expect that James Harden will overtake that in at max 2 seasons, though. Very curious to see what James Harden's ceiling is. Man, Westbrook shooting 56% from the field. That is wild. Hey, Delonte West, 17.7, 5 and 6, 1 steal. I guess that's what happens when you get played 48 minutes per game. But I'm sure that we're going to hear plenty of chirping from Cookie that is talking up that and all of his other players. Really no clear first scoring option here for the New Orleans Hornets. Maybe that's been a bit of their issue. 3 players hovering around that 15-point per game mark. New York Knicks, 22 points per game for Monta Ellis. Looks like Kobe might have dropped in scoring just a little bit. I wouldn't say this team is struggling by any means, but they have not significantly improved since the beginning of the season. The Magic, such an interesting 9 seed. They played Penny Hardaway as many minutes as they possibly could, and he still didn't get to 10 points per game. The kind of dark horse Mavericks here. If Dwight steps it up, if he starts scoring 20 points per game in the playoffs, watch out for this team. Dirk stepped it up in the scoring a little bit. I think that he was around 16.5 to 17 for the majority of the season, I think. So to step up to 19 in that final stretch is impressive. Shooting 51%. The Nuggies. Wes Matthews, great acquisition from the Pacers. Keep them with their defensive mindset by giving them more shooting. They're one of my favorite retooling situations for a clean pivot to another chapter. Man, look at this. Derrick Rose, 28 points per game. Next highest score, 12.6, with Chris Kaman, who's underrated, but wild. Yeah, these Rockets aren't getting any commentary. We garbage. That going to change, though. Hito Turkoglu. Turkoglu. Shout out. Dwayne Wade, I think he was first team All NBA, 25 points per game. I think he was also first or second team All Defense. I know that the Suns are struggling, but he is in the prime of his career and a very valuable asset. Yeah, it does look like Kevin Martin dropped off a little bit. He was shooting above 25 points per game, but that's okay. This team is humming. Whew. All right, the Warriors no longer have only one double-digit score. They have two. Lemon Pepper stepped it up in the final stretch. This Wizards team, underrated. If they get a good pick in this draft, they can really turn things around. Eric Gordon is an absolute bucket. Incredible stuff. Okay, so we showed player contract extensions prior. There's no way to see them right now. But just as a reminder, you had two contract extensions that you could do in the regular season, and once we hit the offseason, you will have one that you can do. And so that's three in any full season cycle. That's to limit people from hoarding players for too long. We do find that they are generally too quick to agree to extensions. But yeah, that should cover everything. And be sure to tune in for the playoffs. Very excited to see what happens.